You might notice a different quality to the video today. That is because I'm having trouble with my usual camera. Something's wrong with the lens. It's not focusing at all. So I'm here now using my cell phone because, I gotta be out there. I gotta be making content. The show's gotta go on by any means necessary. I apologize for, the quality of this one, but not much I can do, unfortunately. I usually do a lot of reading, and today I wanted to talk about one of the books I just finished reading called The Soil Will Save Us by Kristen Olson. I think this book is a really great introduction to soil science and just what has been going on, like sort of the history to where we are now, just as like how we got to the conditions of the soil that we have. The author brings in, she talks a lot about like her own personal history with like her father wanting the perfect lawn, like how she takes care of her own garden. But then she interviews a lot of soil scientists, including Elaine Ingram, who is the go-to scientist as far as soil is concerned. Also talks to a lot of farmers and their take on it, because, who has a better idea of the soil than the people that are out there working the land and get the first-hand account. One of the big issues we deal with today, of course, is global warming and all the release of carbon in the atmosphere. And it's easy to blame, a lot of manufacturers, oil companies, stuff like that, people releasing a lot of that carbon into the air. But a sector that often gets mislooked as far as, one of the big releasers of carbon into the air is farms and how we've been managing the land. Since people have begun farming, we've been tilling and plowing, and just once you start digging in to all that nutrient-rich soil, you start releasing tons of carbon. All that carbon that is locked up into that soil just gets released into the atmosphere, and it's a lot of it. Soil has been storing immense amounts of carbon in there, just due to those farming practices. And that brings up into when she talks about the Dust Bowl of the 1930s, when they were just plowing the land so deep and such a large acreage that, there was just nothing holding the soil in place, and these huge winds came and just clouds of dust just started moving across the country, and dust so thick that people had to use ropes in order to get from the house to the barn and stuff like that. Just a giant man-made disaster, basically. And of course, the deforesting and all the deforestation is just terrible on soil health, and numerous other reasons. But once these trees are being cut down, you're just going to get all kinds of soil erosion. That carbon, again, is going to get released. Another issue she talks about in the book, grazing. Just how overgrazing can be a huge impact on soil health, the degradation of soil. We've seen it firsthand here in southeast Arizona, where you can see lands that have been overgrazed, and the soil health is so much poorer, and a raise in thorny acacia is like a way for the land to sort of defend itself from all the grazing that has been going on. As much as the grazing can harm the soil. Now, here's a caveat where planned rotational grazing can actually be a help. Instead of just letting the cattle sit in one area and just mow all that grass down to the bare earth, you let them, cattle or other animals, you let them eat that grass to a point, obviously not too low, and then you let loose their manure, trample that manure and the grass into the ground, get that into the soil for the microbes to eat, and then you move them on to the next area, and you keep moving them on like that. And that's one way in which animal systems can help repair the degradation of soil. And it's they even cite some examples of where fields with this planned rotational grazing have actually healed much quicker than with no interference at all. Sometimes, without the interference, the land almost can't repair itself. It's just doesn't get enough natural water. Sometimes it's very tough for that land to repair itself. And we know firsthand about rainfall and just that sparse, random rainfall. Yeah, it's very tough for some of those natural systems to recover with like that. You get once you get that loss of vegetation, it's very difficult for it to come back. You see that soil degradation, and it just keeps getting worse. It doesn't get any better because then it's very difficult when that rain does fall for that soil to penetrate the ground because it gets so hard and compact. And of course, with all this, with all the damage being done to the soil with plowing and deforestation, that leaves the soil lacking in nutrients and biodiversity in that soil, which creates an issue for the plants to absorb the nutrients. And so since that soil is so nutrient deficient, that means it means an increase in synthetic fertilizer use. And because those plants are so weakened, those plants' immune systems are so weakened, that means increased use of pesticides. And then, once you start using those, it's a trap. You find yourself in a cycle, and you got to keep using it over and over again. But with those synthetic fertilizers, you get your big three. You get your nitrogen, your phosphorus, and your potassium, and that's it. And they talk about they just discover all the time even more and more nutrients that are naturally found in the soil that they're just not getting. And once you start using those artificial nutrients, which is so easy for the plant roots to take up, they're not going to those soil exudates to trade off to get those nutrients. So it ends up, you get weaker plants because of that. It's not all doom and gloom talking about the problems. There's a lot of solutions in there too. And that's of course going from these tilling and plowing practices to a no-till farming. And that's becoming bigger. Using these natural farming, no-tilling techniques, using cover crops, rotational crops, all helps to get more biomass into the soil, helps to overall increase soil health. And that's one distinction that they talk about in that book, talking about how people used to talk about good soil and bad soil. But now a more accurate way to maybe do it is talk about how healthy is the soil. That just brings a little bit more specificity to it. It's not just good or bad, but like, what's the health? What's the condition of that soil? Because it can all be brought back. It's not so far gone. But one particular story from that book sticks out in my mind. It's about a farmer who had started using a no-tilling technique, doing cover crops, rotating the crops. His farm was just, the soil was so healthy and lush, and like even in times of drought, other farms would suffer, but his kept going without being impacted all that much. And she visited him on his farm. He had this 4-foot long soil moisture rod, and he took this rod and just stuck it all the way into the ground, right up to his knuckles. And then, that was a very impressive feat. So he pulls it out and he gives it to her. And she's thinking, well, this is a big, strong guy. Surely he can, push this thing into the ground. But, she did it herself. No issues. 4 feet all the way into the ground. And that is an impressive feat. I don't know if you've tried ever tried doing that, pushing anything into the ground, we can get maybe 6 inches to a foot over here. To be able to do that's quite a feat. You can imagine how much water just gets absorbed right into that soil, which is absolutely fantastic. He actually goes into detail about just when he started and how much more water they're just getting absorbed into that soil. I think that's absolutely fantastic. And I think that's absolutely how, one way in which we can turn around this issue with getting the carbon out of the atmosphere is attending to the soil health. I think that's the big takeaway from the book. But unfortunately, even though these systems do show a lot of promise and a lot of evidence of how successful they can be, change is so slow. Especially since there's so much money tied up into the agricultural business, so much government subsidies, big chemical corporations. There's a lot of money into doing business as usual. There isn't money in finding more efficient, cheaper ways to do things. They don't want natural farming. They want to use the synthetic fertilizers and the pesticides. And then when they do studies on agriculture, where does that money come from? It comes from the companies that want to sell their products. So even in the schools where these studies are done, it's funded by these corporations. And although they may not specifically prevent these schools from conducting studies on natural farming practices and these alternative farming practices, they're always kind of like looming in the background. It's like you gotta go, unfortunately, where the money is. I think slowly making these changes, showing that this can be done and done well, is the way we're going to make those changes. If change is going to happen, it's going to be done by individuals. In order to improve soil health and grow food sustainably for a growing population, you might have to move away from large-scale industry farms anyway. And it would be better to go with small, localized growers. The food's going to be better quality, better tasting, and that's going to be the way to go in the future. That's how you feed the growing population. Everyone has a responsibility to attend to the carbon in the atmosphere and the health of the soil. I think if you have access to soil, in your backyard, your front yard, start growing some trees, start a garden. We have that ability to make those changes. I definitely recommend this book. It's just a great way to get into learning about soil and about its effects on the climate and the environment. So if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe. So many projects coming up. You don't want to miss a thing. Hopefully I'm not using the cell phone for too much longer. Please don't be afraid to share this video. And don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. All right, thanks everyone.